What's it when you eat meat and vegetables? What's that?
I was about to say pescatarian, but that's not right.
Men are more pescatarian.
That's fish.
Fish. Women are more pescatarian in their book choices, aren't they? I think they'll basically read anything and anything that, as long as it's good and it's recommended. Men seem to be more reticent to just read fiction generally. They're more genre focused, I guess.
This week's guest is writer, foodie, and founder of the Boys Book Club. He's written for pretty much every glossy mag you can think of, Vogue, GQ, Esquire, and his debut novel, Nearly Departed, is a rom-com about grief that somehow manages to be really funny.
Stop watching brain rot and read a book instead. These are 5 books of boys that'll make you feel something.
He's also head honcho at Boys Book Club. You might recognise him from his social media posts giving great recommendations for books that boys should read. I'm lucky enough to call him a friend, and I love his writing. He always manages to find the funny and the tender. Welcome to Character Study. It's Lucas Oakley. Lucas, tell me, did you always want to be a writer?
Yes, I think I did, to be honest, for as long as I can remember, basically. I think I've got a really distinct memory of being maybe 8 years old at the time in primary school, maybe year 2, and we had to do this creative writing assignment, and I wrote this story which was about 3 brothers, and one of the brothers gets kidnapped by a dragon, and then in order to get their brother back from the dragon, they have to play against him in a game of darts, and that's the challenge the dragon sets for them. One of the brothers beats the dragon at darts, and they get their brother back, and this at the time it felt like this really epic story in my head, but it was about a page long max, I think, and I did it in that really like curly font that the medieval people used to use. And I remember my teacher like writing this amazing, excellent, giving me a sticker, and then she got me to show it to the headmaster, and the headmaster was like, this is amazing, this is a really beautiful story. And I think the feedback from that and creating something and writing something that gave me such positive approval meant that I just kept doing it. I kept wanting to do that. I kept focusing on writing from there, and that sort of got me interested in English and books and reading. And then I always had my nose in a book, and then I studied English at university, then did a master's in magazine journalism. So I've always kind of been on that pathway, and it's nice to see I've actually kind of semi-achieved it.
So there's something in your personality that really responds to having a sticker or some sense of like approval or validation. That kind of encouragement, I think, really early on can be really helpful. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, that I was chasing that dragon ever since, pun intended. I think it's one of these... Finishing a maths problem didn't give me any satisfaction, but being able to write a really good sentence that did something else and sort of had the potential to move someone was more exciting to me. So I guess that sort of lit up my brain in a different way.
I also think there's a lot of people that will be really interested in like a darts rom-com crossover. So maybe something to revisit. Yeah,
I think that's it. Children's books is my next big venture. I think if the writing books for adults goes badly wrong, I'll keep sort of slowly going down. I go to YA, then 10-year-olds, and sort of slowly get down to the pre-baby age.
And do you feel like a writer now, or when does that moment happen for you? Was it when you had one of your first publications in a magazine? Was it when your book came out? Or do you still have that kind of imposter sense of, oh, can I call myself a writer yet?
It's a tough one, 'cause I think in a sense you're always going to have that imposter syndrome. I think I am a writer, but I'm not the writer I want to be just yet. I feel as if I'm not done. I'm still in the oven, I'm not the finished product. There's still a long way for me to go in my career for where I want to be, or I can see myself getting. But I would call myself a writer. I mean, professionally I've been doing it for maybe 7-8 years now. The moment I think I thought I made it was probably when I did a Esquire profile of Liam Payne, and that was the cover of a magazine, and that felt quite exciting. And being able to get my mum and dad to go and buy it and seeing it in the shops and seeing my name on it was a real like, okay, you actually are quite good at this and you've achieved something here. So I think that was a nice sort of, it got the ball rolling. And then novel-wise, getting it published was nice, but it still feels a bit surreal. It wasn't until I went to a falafel shop and the person behind me in queue like tapped my shoulder and was like, I've just finished reading your book and I loved it. That was a real moment for me. It was like, that's incredible. This is real. I'm doing something that people are enjoying, or it's touching people. Even if it's one person who's in the local area, that to me felt like, okay, you've done something here. Regardless, it means more than newspapers and reviews and all that sort of stuff.
I think there's something for the sense of achievement when it's tangible as well. Being able to tell your parents, you can go and buy this magazine, or to hold a book is like so amazing. So I know you've been published by GQ and Vogue and Esquire. All those publications are so amazing. The moment when you can like physically hold something is definitely one of those pinch me moments.
It's much less ephemeral as well. There's only so many times you can send a mum a link to like a listicle you've written online. It doesn't feel as real. Where you can buy it with money, and other people are going to buy it with money. It makes exchange feel a bit more I guess, yeah, real in some sense.
It's interesting as well, you talking about like the writer that you want to be and that slight gap, I suppose, between where we all perceive ourselves. I don't know if you find this as well, but with having a book, you work on a book for so long, and then by the time it comes out, hopefully you're writing, you're improving constantly. I guess writing is a craft, you're always improving. And so there's always, I feel, this gap when I meet people and they say they've read the title year. I'm almost like, oh, in my head, the writer that I am now is kind of has moved on since that publication. So it's really exciting when people are reading you as well. But hopefully if you're growing, there's always like this slight gap between the writer that people are reading out in the world and then like the writer that you see yourself becoming.
Yeah, definitely. I think the way the publishing moves so slowly, it aids that a little bit. It kind of abets the process. Another one for me, I think, is the writer you want to be and the writer you actually can be aren't always going to be the same thing. I think, especially when I first started writing my novel, I wanted to set out to write this, really serious, gritty book, and then what I ended up writing was things that kept having jokes or kept having quite sweet moments, and I kept finding my natural inclination was to be humorous, was to be funny, and maybe writing that big serious book wasn't going to come for me just yet. Maybe it's not something I could ever do, I don't know, but I had to go with what felt right, and I think maybe the writer I wanted to be isn't the writer I actually am in some ways.
I think as well in our head, do you think mentally we always have a kind of writer on our shoulder who's a big critic, or that person that's saying who we should be? Because to me, your writing is so full of humor and warmth. Hearing you wanted to write a big, serious, gritty tome, that surprises me. What do you think that is in you that feels that that's the kind of writing you should be doing?
I think it was probably something to do with what I was reading at the time. And I think growing up, I think as a man especially, all the books you kind of get thrusted in your hands are Hemingway and these big serious Faulkner, these big sort of tentpole authors who write books that aren't funny at all and are very, dry in some sense. They're definitely about violence and masculinity and sometimes hunting and war and shooting. You're told these are like the great books, and sort of you do try and emulate them. I think especially the early stuff I was writing did sort of fit more within that mold, and then you kind of figure yourself out and you figure out your different inspirations and where you can sit in the canon. But I think for a lot of it isn't very funny, the books you get written growing up, especially at school and stuff like GCSE, A-level. A lot of big seminal texts don't really have humor. The first version of my book had way too many jokes. There was like far too many bits that were too abstract, too many things that just I would find funny and maybe my group chat would find funny, but I had to sort of cut a lot of that out. So the version you read is actually a much drier, serious version than the first draft, believe it or not.
I want the deep cuts. I want the removed jokes. I want to know. Maybe that's something that comes with time as well, as having the confidence to trust that your audience are going to get you in that way. But let's dive. I want to talk more about your novel, Nearly Departed. Tell me more about it. What was like that first idea that came to you when you were thinking about this book?
It was quite a long gestation process in some ways, where I think I started writing it during COVID, obviously, when everyone had far too much time on their hands. And I think if I was ever going to write a book, that was the time to sort of sit down and actually start getting some words down on a big Google document. It felt like I've got so many hours in the day, I might as well at least noodle around a little bit every now and then on it. And the impetus was basically, I used to work at a magazine in Clapham, and one day going to work, I essentially saw a woman go into the back of a cement truck off her bike, and she unfortunately died from that instant. And it was really horrifying to see, but I was quite separate from it. And then day after day after day, there was flowers left there, and there was a little sort of memorial left, and there were sort of people grieving in public, and it was a hard thing to watch. But as hard as it was to watch, I was so separate from it, I couldn't really feel the proper amount of emotion that you could. Like, seeing a stranger die is odd because it means so much to someone else out there, but to me it was kind of just seeing someone's life end. But that's someone's wife, that's someone's daughter, that's potentially someone's sister, that you don't know what's going on in their lives. So that was always lingering at the back of my mind, was what would it be like for that to happen to you on just a random Wednesday? Like someone you love goes to work and then you never see them again, you don't get a chance to say goodbye. It's very short, sharp and sudden. And then growing up, my dad always wore 2 wedding rings, and that was something I was always aware of. I didn't really understand what was going on until I was about maybe 14, 15, and he told me that essentially when he was younger, he had a wife. They got married very young. I think they got married when they were 18, and she unfortunately died when she was 20, 21, I believe. She was really young, and that kind of has always impacted him. But then being able to sort of find a second love, which ended up being my mother, means I exist. So he had to sort of pick himself back up from grief, find love again. It doesn't negate the love you once had. You can move on in different ways, and you still have that past relationship. And then it made me exist. It made my family, which is a beautiful, loving family. So I guess those two things combined made me think, What if I combined those, wrote about it, and also made it about myself? What would it be like?
Writing is so fascinating, how you can have these questions of like, what if, and especially as a helpful way of processing something. Because like you say, it wasn't something that affected you, but it did affect you. You were there and you were thinking about it and trying to fold that away into your life as if like, what would that be like? It's so interesting that creative process can then really start from there. And also it's so interesting to hear this idea of two loves and one not being any less big or grand in a life, because that's totally what we feel in your book. Tell me a little bit about that, how you balance having two love stories that both feel equally complex, equally nourishing, how you then wrote about both of those in your book.
It's something I struggled with a little bit. I'm still not completely sold on whether there's an even balance. Sometimes I feel as if the Nina relationship, which is the second relationship he gets into, is slightly less developed than the other relationship. But because of the years that Joel and Beth, who's the girlfriend who dies, spend together, that's almost quite a natural imbalance in some ways. He does know this other woman better than he knows a new woman who's sort of just come onto the scene. To me, it took a long time of honing the book and going through multiple drafts to try and work out how much of each character was going to be in it. The first version had a lot more Nina, and there's more from Nina's point of view, so she was almost a larger character in the initial stages. And then I think brevity and time, you only have so much room in a book, basically. I had to cut that down a little bit, so I had to make sure the scenes that she is in there are quite impactful, and she does make an impact. You can sort of see her connection with Joel. And I think Beth is almost as much of a main character as Joel. I mean, Joel is the narrator, but all of it is third person, and she's basically in a good part of the book from basically 60 pages in. She's in the majority of scenes. I think to me, she was the character that I felt myself enjoying the most to write in some ways. I think I kind of hopefully that came through in their relationship. But I think love is hard to write because you only ever really have your own perspective on love and then what you've digested from films and books and all sorts of media, and making sure what you're writing isn't too happy but also has to kind of hit those cliches at the same time it's difficult, because I was writing a rom-com but also wanted to write something that was in dialogue with rom-coms at the same time. But you don't want to get too meta, you don't want to be too traditional, and finding some way in between is quite a tricky space to work with.
And also the way that media often portrays romance is quite linear. It's that you meet someone and that person's the love of your life and then you have the happy ending. So what about where you have a past and that's really involved with how you meet that person, or you also meet somebody else? And I think the beauty of the book is how it captures that, and also finding a way to settle into the anxiety of meeting someone new when you have a complicated past, which realistically all of us do. I remember some of those scenes where Joel's like at a bus stop trying to reply and his heart's stopping because he's getting this message. That felt so real. And I suppose that's something of you can step into from the story, because we've all related to that, right?
Yeah, I think the modern dating scenes are ones that people seem to have vibe with quite a lot, and I think that speaks to the fact that everyone in this day and age has been on a bad day. Everyone's been on a bad day. Everyone's been on a good day. Everyone's been on that side of the power balance where you're slightly more into someone than you're into them, or they're more into you than you are. And there's all kinds of things I think everyone has kind of experienced now, because dating has become so quick and so commodified in a way where we've all got the apps. You've all got to have, you need to be on like X amount of dates with someone. Once you've had 3 dates, you can then sleep with them. Once you slept with them, you can then do X and Y. And there's always weird rules and pathways that dating have nowadays. I wanted to write about those, but from a point of view where you need to realize how ridiculous they are, but at the same time you need to take them seriously, because regardless of whether or not we like to think about how many X's we put on the end of a text, it's silly and it doesn't matter, but it does matter. And those things do matter, and they are quite important to the texture of relationships, especially in that early phase where you don't want to make sure you're doing the wrong thing, but also you don't want to be completely losing sight of yourself by doing something you're not really feeling. I think that's the thing about dating profiles. You're sort of selling yourself, but there's this weird veneer of reality where it's not real at all. It's just like 4 captions and a few videos and like a nice image of you on a beach. That's all you got. It's
so tough because there is a complete veneer, and you do have to like put on this character and persona, and then even choose what kind of version of yourself you want to present to the world. I feel like on Hinge, having to have like a few photos and then these quotes, it's so difficult to curate a version of yourself, because most of us have like a silly side, the outdoorsy side. How do you capture all of that? All of us are having to constantly like craft a message. There's so much like almost branding that goes into that. It's really tiring. And then finding a way to be like vulnerable, whatever that can mean within dating, is really difficult.
That tells a lot about the person. It's not only this is what they're they are like, they're like these things, these are their hobbies. It's also the hobbies they decided to show you. I think the one thing that I kind of always found quite funny on Hinge was when you get the little drug symbol, and it's like, yes, do drugs. It's not even the marijuana one, the one that's like the pill, where it's like the serious drugs. And I'm sort of like, everyone does drugs, everyone does recreational drugs. If you have to put yes actively on your profile with a little drug thing, you must do a lot of drugs. So that tells me something about someone,
But it's not even that they do drugs, it's that they want you to know or think that they do as well. So there's this like extra meta remove level. As a writer, do you feel like people are often asking you to help them with their dating profiles or their dating texts?
I think, especially as a man, I think men generally don't, the bar is so low for men. I think maybe it's got better nowadays. I've not been on the apps in a while, but I think back in the day, I think men on dating profiles wouldn't put in a huge amount of effort, and even sort of doing something that's slightly more, just a bit more personality focused tended to help you out a little bit. I think men generally just sort of relied on looking nice and having a Guinness in a hand, and that was it, job done, basically.
Who's this guy? Sounds lovely. Guinness in hand, smiling. One to prove he's got a few friends.
Yeah, one with a hat on, one without a hat on, just so you can see the hairline.
And you've been off the market a while because you have a fantastic partner, Kath, which is actually how I know you, because we're in a book club. And it's really interesting reading your book. When I was reading your kind of female protagonists, I felt like I was kind of imagining her there, and I was trying to think as I was going through it, like, are there, specific references to her? But it's not even that. I think it's that because I know you and I know her, and I can feel the like warmth and the admiration for the female characters that you have in your book. I almost like imbue that to her. And I think that's quite interesting because in writing that I've done, even where I've invented like a love story or, a male protagonist, I feel like people see my partner often because I'm there in the writing. Is that something that you feel like people in your life have felt, and how conscious of that were you when you were writing about love?
Yeah, I mean, it's something everyone I know personally always talks about whenever they read the book. They're like, I read it in your voice, because they know what I sound like and they know my cadence or my intonation. And it's obviously written in a similar way, where I know how you'd say this and I know where you got this from, and I can kind of see the fingerprints on it. And it sort of makes it a less interesting book in that way, because that someone can kind of like, it's knowing how the sausage gets made in some ways. They kind of know what makes you an individual, therefore they can kind of read into the book and go, okay, these things sort of make the book. But the thing that I always tell people about the characters is that basically you can think they're people in my life, but realistically every single character is me. It's just me. It's come from my brain. They're all parts of me that I'm kind of just going, what if I was this? What if I was that? What if I was here? What if I was there? And it all has to be based on some kind of reality, and you only ever really get to be inside your own brain for those kind of things. And I think it's a lot of things I did steal in real life were the physical appearances of people, because I found the fact that creating a character is hard enough. Creating a character who then dresses in a consistent way, I find almost impossible. I'm like, how the hell am I meant to know what they're going to wear on like 3 or 4 different outfits for a person who doesn't exist? Therefore, if I steal 3 or 4 outfits from someone I actually know, and they consistently wear those outfits, that's then based in reality. So that's a nice anchor to go, okay, I know someone who would wear this, they'd wear that, they'd wear that. If I give a character that, that's at least consistent. It's cohesion. It says something about them where it's not going to completely jar. I think American Psycho is a great example, where pages on pages, descriptions of these different outfits that people are wearing, and you kind of get, if you actually try to picture them all, they look ridiculous. And that was the kind of point that I think Bret Easton Ellis was trying to make, was just, if I write this book and people actually picture these outfits, they're stupid. But if you read the names, you read the brand names of Armani this, Armani that, and it seems like it makes sense, but it's almost like an inside joke where he's like, no, they look ridiculous. So for me, I stole lots of appearances, I stole some personality traits, and maybe like a few haircuts down the way.
That's so interesting that your brain works like that. I hadn't really thought about the wardrobe and clothes, but that is true. That's hard to be a writer and then also curate like a whole wardrobe for an imaginary person.
Yeah, it's like The Sims, basically.
It is The Sims. Yeah, it's interesting what you say about having someone's fingerprints on it, because I think that's often where partners will kind of creep into writing more than anything, in just things that we've seen, or, we'll be out on a walk and I'll look at something, we'll talk about something a little bit, and then that can like find its way in. So not even as much as in being like a love interest in a book and having their personality, but almost like the small little details that you pick up in day-to-day life. I always think that must be funny, being like a Gem or a Kath reading it and then being like, oh yeah, I remember that conversation we had, and it's been put onto completely different characters.
It's part and parcel of spending so much time with someone as well. If you spend so many hours of your life with a person, they know you so intimately, they know how you kind of see the world. I think novels are for better or worse, like there's a writer's perspective on the world. You can't really help but put at least a little spin of it on there. So they've probably seen you make some remark and it comes up. Again, maybe not from the mouth of the main character, maybe it's from the mouth of a character who you're trying to make fun of. But if you think you've said something ridiculous and, if Kat's made fun of me for saying something, I might then put that in the mouth of a character who's meant to be made fun of in the book and kind of go, okay, maybe, yeah, she was right and I was wrong, and turn it from myself into another human being is quite an interesting way where you can take your own flaws that someone else sees in you and then put them onto a fictional human being instead, which is a nice way to just outsource any anxiety about it.
That collection period is always really interesting. And you say that this is your perspective, and it's clearly, a male perspective on a rom-com, and your writing reminds me so much of David Nichols for that reason. There's so much I suppose interiority about how he feels about the world, but also just a general warmth and love and adoration for the experience of life and connection. But talk to me a little bit about writing a novel that has a male protagonist. When you had the book written about by people or in reviews, is that something that you felt like was treated differently to how a rom-com that was written by a woman would be received?
It was an interesting journey, I think. It did take a long time to kind of convince people that it was a good idea. I think one agent in a quite an early meeting that I had, who I didn't end up signing with, said that no one wants to read rom-coms written by men, and that was sort of I don't know necessarily if it's true, but the fact of the matter is most readers are women, especially within the sort of romance rom-com genre. The readers are even more female dominated, and generally they're more inclined to read books written from a female perspective. David Nichols is obviously a great example of someone who's against that grain, but he's one of the fewer examples, I guess, in that space. But there is like a new crop of writers who are coming up. You've got Bobby Palmer, Manish Chauhan, Caleb Azuma Nelson. There's lots of men writing, and there's never been a shortage of male writers. There never will be. But I think writing from the male perspective in a genre that maybe written majority for women, it was a difficult sell at the start. I think I had to convince people that it was still going to be relatable for just about everyone. I think I've seen an even split. It's hard when you kind of launch an internet platform based around books that men should be reading and books that men might like, and then you write a book that men maybe don't like at all. I think that my agent saw a bit of a disconnect there, but I had to sort of convince her that I was like, well, this book's coming out now. I can write a book for about football down the line. It's fine. This book for now felt right for me.
Yeah, and I think that's really one of the great things about fiction is that it helps put you into other people's perspectives. It helps you feel from other people. And so being able to have a rom-com from a man, and Joel is so relatable. He's very open, he's messy, he kind of has this self-doubt that we can all relate to. But that's really important, I think, to be able to experience love from that perspective, especially, I think, in today's culture where a lot of what we see about how men are viewing dating is quite negative. But actually, it's a good reminder we all want the same things. We want connection and to be seen and loved. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think it's okay to be like corny and emotional about these things as well. I think that's kind of a big thing you find with a lot of male writers, where they take themselves very seriously or they don't, and they're like, Will Self, where it's all just a farce and everything is ridiculous and nothing should be serious. And it's finding that middle ground, I think, doesn't seem to be a thing a lot of male writers do, where it's like you can write warm novels that are kind of a bit gooey, but also you don't need to make fun of someone for that. I think Matt Haig gets a lot of stick, I think, for being a writer who's like, a lot of the negative reviews, they call it like sugary or too sweet or this or that. And I guarantee if he was a female writer, I don't think he'd be getting those criticisms. I think it's because it's a man. It seems like not something a man should be writing about in some ways. I think his books are great, and he's got a really passionate readership and a really passionate audience who love his writing. I think it just rubs people up the wrong way because it's seen as maybe something that's not very masculine.
Yeah, definitely. And, Joel, your protagonist, is having a really tough time. He's struggling emotionally, and he's got an amazing cast of friends that support him, which is one of the things I love about your book. But I'm interested if you felt like to write that kind of a man who was really struggling emotionally and was, feeling a lot of depression, whether you had to have this element of grief. Like, do you feel like you would have been able to be as open with his emotions had you not had that experience in the book? Or was that something that was already so baked in, you felt like you could really lean into it?
It's a tough one where I think men generally are quite closed off individuals. You can read sort of David Soloy's Flesh as like maybe the sort of extreme example of a man who basically just says okay the entire time and doesn't really ever express himself emotionally. And that book's all about the things that aren't said. And my book is almost the opposite, where it's a very interior book. There's lots of anxieties, lots of stream of consciousness kind of thought patterns, and sort of keeps going round and round his head quite a lot. And that to me is quite an accurate point of view of how men tends to deal with big life problems. Something like grief, I think women tend to internalize it a lot more, and then the friends in his life are basically used as a way to externalize it and get him a bit of a, it's not meant to be like a how-to book of how to grieve, how to kind of move on, but it's basically hopefully going to tell people that you need to talk to people, you need to have people in your life who are going to support you through these things. It's not a individual process. You can't just be completely solipsistic about it. I think that was something about his character is rubbed people up the wrong way, and some reviews were like, I don't find him very relatable, I think it's ridiculous, he's sort of like so unlikable, and I was like, it's kind of meant to be a little bit unlikable, it's a little bit insufferable, but we all are a little bit insufferable. I think grief can make you incredibly narcissistic, it can make you very solipsistic, it makes you look internally where maybe you should be looking around you a little bit more, when the dust has settled afterwards. And it's a tough middle ground. I always wanted to write about grief sort of not raw, not sharp. I wanted to write about grief that was a bit fuzzier, and 3 years on was sort of the set time that I gave myself just to make it a bit more like, okay, you get the situation where at some point you're going to have to answer emails again and get back on it. Like, I know you've lost someone you love, but like the emails aren't going to write themselves, mate. You need to pay rent, you need to do this. And that kind of admin was something I wanted to write about. And being a man was almost, that's kind of a more realistic male response where you kind of get in that, just get on with it. Just get on with it. Get your head down, get on with it. That's the way most people are kind of doing it. Maybe it would take, a ghost coming back to life for you to realize maybe it's okay to think about it a little bit,
I want to talk a little bit more about reviews later, so let's come back to that. But that unlikable character thing is so tough. I think every author's really had that, of someone being like, they're so unlikable, couldn't stand them. But actually, that's one of the really big questions that I think your book explores is how do you have something life-changing, devastating happen to you and re-enter your life when everything's different? How do you have friendships and continue them? Because lots of us have been through a really tough time, whether that's grief, heartbreak, in Joel's case, that's both has happened to him at the same time.
Yeah.
And then find a way to come out of that and be with your friends and be engaged. That's so difficult as a young person to experience anything and balance those relationships. And I think just beyond the grief, but how the grief touched everything in his life was really great to read about.
It's exhausting as well. It can be. If you're supporting someone through this, it's not easy. And he's got this like good support network, but you can see it's made an impact in his relationship with his friends, and that's kind of the big tension between him and Alice in the book, is he's not been very present for her, and as much as she loves him and much as she wants to support him, he's kind of been neglecting that friendship a little bit. So that arc was quite an interesting one. I want to explore that with them, and I think I did an okay job with it. The first version of the book didn't really have that at all, and that was quite a late edition where it kind of made her a bit more real and a bit more sort of 3D. I think she felt a bit flat in the first kind of few drafts, and I kind of needed to have that arc where you're not always going to get to keep all your friendships. You are going to lose some people, but the ones you keep generally are the better eggs, as most things in life. I think people stick around, the ones who are worth it.
Oh, that's cool that came in later in the draft. I love hearing about stuff like that because that felt really fleshed out to me. I think it added that dimension of time to it because I think change can be really complicated with grief because he's changed as a person. He also doesn't want the world to change because it changing is really moving farther away from Beth. But then also the people around him are changing, and all of that can be so difficult for managing relationships and friendships. So I really love that. When you were kind of thinking about the ending for Joel, what his happy ending was going to be, do you feel like that gave you any reflections on your own life? Because I feel like when we write the end of a book, you don't want it to be too corny. You want them to have some feeling of happiness, but you also don't want it to be like completely unrealistic. And I found when I was writing, the title was a bit different because it was a memoir, but I had to actually I had to pitch what the end of the book was going to be before I had to then finish writing it. And so it's a really interesting process to go through about what you feel like a happy ending would mean to you. Did writing that for Joel give you any reflections on your own life?
So the happy ending actually came pretty very extremely late in the game, where for the most part, for most drafts that I'd written, it had quite a bit of a bummer as an ending. It didn't end on a very happy note. It sort of it ended with them, kind of him and Nina at the airport, and then it's sort of like, and then they break up in 2 months' time. Like a little aside line where it's going, this seems fine now, but they do break up. And I think that was one thing where I think every editor and every agent I kind of spoke to, they're like, man, just end it on a happy note. Don't be like, there's no need to sort of end it on this sort of cynical, putting a pin in the balloon. I think that's something where I wanted to do a little bit and maybe did too much in my early writing, where I didn't want to be too sentimental, and I was almost afraid of being sentimental and afraid of giving someone a happy ending because it felt a bit too neat. It felt a bit too Hollywood. But then you come to realize there's a reason people like those narratives, the reason we like reading things like that, because it makes us happy and it gives us hope. And maybe it's not a bad thing to write something hopeful. So in a way, maybe I was sort of holding myself back from giving my characters a happy ending. I'm in my head about things anyway. I think generally maybe it was quite a good experience to go, okay, you're allowed to give someone a happy ending. You know, I'm always been a bit of a control freak, and I think novels are in a lot of ways the ultimate form of control. You know, you got to be in control of every character. You say when it rains, you say when it snows. This is your little world. You can do what you like with it. As someone who loves having control and loves knowing what's going on, the novel's a perfect place to kind of stretch yourself with that. So then to have someone come in who's like an editor, tell you, maybe change this thing a little bit, and being able to bend the knee and go, you know what, I think you're right. I think that's a good idea. You probably learned something from that process. I learned something about myself by going, okay, why did I want to make it unhappy? And why is making it happy more satisfying for a reader? And that's not a bad thing. You know, it's okay to satisfy people. It's okay to be out of control. Go, okay, look, they can do what they want with it. It's then their product.
Do you believe in happy endings in real life?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm a pessimist and an optimist. It depends. I think on the wide scale stuff, I tend to be an optimist. I'm a pessimist maybe when it comes to like the small minutiae of like, oh, they're never going to email me back. They're never going to read this commission. That's going to go badly wrong. I'm sort of a pessimist with stuff like that, but I'm optimist when it's like global warming. I'm like, oh, we'll fix that. Sure, we'll get that down. We fix the ozone layer. We'll fix global warming. I'm pretty confident someone will figure something out. I believe in humanity, you know, and I think we achieve so much. We'll manage to get something else at some point, but in real life's generally a lot messier. I think you can have a happy ending, but it's not always going to be the ending you expected, or it might end in slightly too soon, and that doesn't make it not happy. It just means you got to be thankful for the times you do have. You know, if like a relationship ends early, be thankful for the good times, because they're not always going to be around.
Yeah, and I suppose writing advice can go the other way, and it can be good life advice, because often what a character in a book wants versus what they actually need end up being two different things. So that's like your complete internal tension, and that's true for most of us as people as well.
Yeah, it's fun writing characters because you sort of realize you're having a conversation with yourself quite a lot, and it can teach you a lot about yourself, but also, I mean, maybe it's a good time to get an external reader and they go, this is a really crazy conversation. You're like, okay, let's delete that one. That's for me personally trying to work something out. That one's never going out to public. Otherwise, you do get some novels that feel a bit just like a writer writing about issues, and you can tell there's like 2-page paragraphs. You're like, okay, this is just, you know, it's ex-writer writing about, you know, Brexit. Cool. It's always Brexit as well. So many writers always like, well, here's my take on Brexit through the mouth of a character. You go, okay, man, I don't need to read any more of that, you know.
And that's exactly what we're talking about having this tiny kind of critical writer on your shoulder of people, what they feel that they should be writing about, of like, oh, I need to have kind of a little internal monologue somewhere about the state of the world. Hello, it's me, Freya, just letting you know that you can now buy my debut novel, A Real Piece of Work. It's a book about sisters, complicated families, and what happens to grief when it becomes a collective experience. You can now buy A Real Piece of Work wherever you buy your books, and if you go in store to Foyles, you'll receive a limited edition cotton bandana while stocks last. If you prefer to listen to your books, then you can get it as an audiobook. Happy reading. Let's talk a little bit about Boys Book Club. Mm-hmm. You're the co-founder of this amazing community and platform. Where did that idea come from?
So initially it was started by myself, a fellow author called Ben Mercer, who used to be a professional rugby player, and then Kaylee Routledge, who used to work at TikTok, and that's how we all met through, I think, the TikTok community initially. I think Ben and Kaylee knew each other through the TikTok book event, and then Kaylee then sent me a message, and we sort of all met up for a coffee. And what we'd all come to realize sort of independently was we all really wanted to be in a book club because we're men who love to read books. But we found whenever we joined one in London, it tended to be a female space. It wasn't necessarily, it was like no boys allowed. It was just the fact that whenever we joined one, we were the only man in the room, and it felt... It wasn't like we weren't welcome, but it felt like we were impinging on something. We were almost ruining their space in some way. So we sort of wanted to be like, okay, how do we not sort of rain on their parade by being the only man in the room? And obviously they kind of feel a bit uncomfortable about it. And then how do we make our own thing? So we go, okay, look, if we all know 2 people who probably want to join a book club, that's enough people. So we started the ball rolling from there. We met up in person sort of once a month from then. And it was a hodgepodge of people who either sort of, like myself, had studied English literature at university and wanted to reconnect with that, or people who are new into reading, or people who sort of just moved to London and wanted to kind of like hang out with people. So ends up being a nice social space as well. And we haven't done the in-person one in a while because we just launched the Instagram page. We're trying to work out the digital balance, but I'm keen to get the in-person book club started again, because to me that's kind of what it's about, that community and being able to talk and have a safe space where I push up against the stuff that's like talk to your barber, men's mental health, you really need to come and talk to your mates. I think that kind of stuff it's really patronizing. The whole point of the book club is basically, it's not come and talk about your feelings, it's come and talk about the book. If it makes you want to then talk about an emotion or something that's real to you, go for it. This is a space you can make jokes, you can laugh about a book, you can disagree with someone. That's what it's about. It's not like meant to be aiding your health. There's no onus to think of it as like self-improvement. I think that's a equally toxic problem men have, where everything needs to be doing something, and this could just be pure pleasure. You can read the book, you can come and say absolutely nothing, that's fine, or you can come and say as much as you want to get off your chest, that's also completely fine. I think we found it as a nice space to learn about people, and I think men famously take a long time to open up, so it took about 3 or 4 books to get people really kind of debating each other. But by the end of it, people are really like, they'll have really upfront conversations about what they think about Sally Rooney, and it's a nice space for that.
I love that. Also, it's so important, I think, to have these kind of middle place objects where you can talk about feelings in a safe way.
Yeah.
I think there are some, big topics around identity, sexuality, the world that we've talked about and explored in my book club, but the book really has to exist as that gateway to into that. I think if we were just going to sit down and have a conversation about something, it can be a little bit harder to really put your feelings out there. You've got these characters that kind of become almost like talismans that you can use to talk. It can be really helpful, but also you've got people's perspectives and these characters' perspectives as ways into feeling new ideas, feeling new perspectives about all of that. I also think you're right. It takes a while to build that trust. That's why a book club's important.
Yeah.
You also get to know people that you wouldn't otherwise meet. Do you think that men are reading books and talking about books in different ways than they were, say, a decade ago?
It's a good question. It's a question that seems to be quite a hot button thing. I mean, this year is the National Year of Reading, so I think every single publication's come up with loads of hot takes about reading and books, and the rise of the performative male seems to be the new hot button subject, where people are really interested in this sort of man who exists and he reads feminist literature in public in order to honey trap women and go on dates with gorgeous women who are flocking to him because he reads bell hooks. And I don't necessarily think that man exists. I think it's something we've kind of made up, and I don't know if this is a real thing. It's something the internet's kind of latched on as this new subject because it gets people quite excited about Jacob Elordi. And the thing that I think I found is different is men have always been pretentious. These pretentious men who are readers have always existed. It's not saying the last 10 years this has become a thing. You look back in books from like the 80s and it's sort of these blue bloods at universities satirizing the same men who are just pretending to know more than they actually know. I think that's always existed. Men have always lied about things to pretend they're more important or seem more clever. I think what you're seeing differently now is reading itself is becoming slightly more popular in the last sort of maybe 2-3 years as a kind of an antidote against screens. I think people are online far too much. I think thankfully we're seeing people want to go back to analog, want to have at least something interesting to say about themselves, and a book is a nice way of being. It is kind of virtue signaling maybe if you're sort of doing it but you're not reading the words, but as long as you read the book, I think it's still a net positive. I think men have sort of found themselves where, I mean, even within the book club we found that a lot of blokes tend to be quite completionist in a way where they read, where a man will be a fantasy reader and he'll just read fantasy books and he'll read basically every single fantasy book, or he'll be like a historical fiction and he'll just read historical fiction. That'll be the only kind of book that he reads. It's harder to get men to less not polymathic, what I mean, omnivorous maybe. What's it when you eat meat and vegetables? What's that?
I was about to say pescatarian, but that's not right.
Men are more pescatarian.
That's fish.
Women are more pescatarian in their book choices, aren't they? Where I think they'll basically read anything and anything that as long as it's good and it's recommended. I think the Women's Prize is a great example of that. It's a really eclectic mix of books where men tend to read very specific things. I think they tend to be less eclectic in their taste. So I think hopefully we'll see more people kind of reading a wider range of fiction. But I think men seem to be more reticent to just read fiction generally. They're more genre bent and genre focused, I guess.
Yeah, and it's not just the performative male. Women carry around books on the tube, and then sometimes I have that. There are weeks I'll carry around a book in my bag all week, and really I just get on the tube and I look at my phone.
But just in case, you never know, you might need it.
Just in case I might be moved to get it out. Yeah. I want to make sure that we talk about two of the biggest loves in your life, books, reading, but also food. And one of the things that really, to me, sets your book apart is just how beautiful the food writing is. And I think especially when you're writing about grief, love, all these things that intersect with like time and senses and feeling. Food is actually a really clever way to bring that into your character's worlds. Tell me about your history writing with food.
Yes, I mean, food to me is just one of those unavoidable facts of life, and you, regardless of what the Huel people will tell you, you do need to eat food, like, and probably 3 times a day. Realistically, you're gonna have breakfast, you're gonna have lunch, you're gonna have dinner. I mean, what you're having for lunch is such a big topic of conversation at every office you'll ever work at, and it will never kind of run dry. You always kind of be like, you know what, I do kind of want to know what you're having for lunch, and I will listen to you, vaguely interested about your quinoa salad. You know, I won't ever ask about breakfast because everyone just has one breakfast and everyone's set with breakfast. That's fine. We don't need to ask about breakfast. It's ridiculous. But where people eat and where people like go out for dinner, it says a lot about you as a person as well now. It's quite a big cultural signifier in a lot of ways, food. And it tells you about a person as much as what music they listen to, what films they watch. I think when you put a character in a book, what they eat is immediately going to tell you about them. I mean, you can read so many books where it's like the vegan, and the vegan is obviously, not only do they eat vegan food, but they're vegan in terms of their life views and this and that. And it tells you a lot about them. If they're like a natural wine person, you immediately think of the character in your head. You go, I know who they are. I know where they go. I know what they do. So I kind of had to put the food writing in there, where I was obviously working day to day. My job at the time was writing about food basically for 5, 6, 7 hours a day sometimes. And then being able to then write about food afterwards felt a bit tiring. So the novel was almost a way to balance out a little bit. But I think for me, especially in terms of grief, I think food is such a big comfort for me personally. I think it is for a lot of people, where it's always kind of going to be something where maybe you can rely on it. Obviously, when you're in the harder phases of grief, the last thing you're thinking about is food. You don't want to eat. Maybe you stop eating. Maybe you're strict with food. Maybe a type of control. But at some point, you're going to make a tray bake. You know, that's a fact of life. Whatever happens to you, the worst thing in the world could happen to you, you're going to make a tray bake at some point, mate. It's going to be the first tray bake you make after your mum has died, but that is going to be the first tray bake you do. And it's just something at some point you need to fuel yourself. You need to keep yourself going. And it's such a consistent part of everyone's life. I think I wanted to put it in there. And to me, it brings me a lot of joy. I think food writing is fun because you can play around with lots of things. And also it's such an individual experience where it doesn't just tell you about what the thing is like, it tells you about their mood at the time. It could be the most bang average plate of pasta, but if you eat it in front of someone gorgeous, it's going to taste amazing. You can be like, this is the best pasta I've ever eaten because I'm in Italy, you look great, I feel great, this is the best meal I've ever had. It's so situational, it sort of seeps into the food, I think, the awareness and like the surroundings.
That's so true. Whatever happens in life, there will always be a tray bake.
Exactly. Well, you're going to have to make one, that's it. Like, God, my last tray bake was a sausage tray bake. The next tray bake, I don't know what it's going to be, but it's going to be there. It might be in 2 months, it might be in 2 days, it might be in 2 years, you know, but it will be there.
And so you were writing in food full time, that was your day job, and then you were kind of like secret novelist by night. And you've been freelance for what, a year now? Tell me about that transition from then kind of leaning into trusting yourself as a writer, like, okay, I'm going to focus on my work and me. That must have been really scary.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I used to work at Mob. They originally called Mob Kitchen. I was there for about 4 years, and we started off, it was sort of in Ben's bedroom. It was quite a sort of a ragtag operation of just people who loved food and loved feeding people. It was really sweet. And then sort of over the years progressed, it became this real grown-up company, and eventually got their own new swanky office. And it was great being there at a time where the company was growing. It's full of exciting people. I've made really great friends from that time period that I sort of still see and still love today. And it was a really good time. But I think by the end of my tenure there, I feel like I had to back myself doing something that I was really passionate about. As much as I was loving the back end stuff and website management, I felt that if I got this book deal, I basically told myself mentally, I need to at least commit to this and see if I can do it. The thing is, you can always get a full-time job again, hopefully, touch wood. The job market's a bit fucked, but you never know. And my thinking was basically, if I'm ever going to make a risk, that was going to be the time to do it. I didn't have a mortgage, I haven't got kids, I haven't got a dog, had no kind of thing holding me back, where I was like, you know what, if you're going to give this a go, you got to give it a proper go. So I've probably been freelance for about a year and a bit now, maybe, I think. And financially, a terrible decision, but it's given me a lot of freedom, a lot more hours, a lot of time to think and write and kind of, yeah, I think I've needed it, because if I wanted to commit to the work, I can't now say that I didn't, at least. Whereas if I'd kept the job and sort of not dedicate myself to it, I'd always have an excuse. I could say, you know what, I would always be the writer if I hadn't just quit my job and write. I would definitely be like a Nobel Prize winning this and that, where at least now I can say, no, you did quit your job and you ended up being this. So this is like, you know, this is what it's going to be. This is what you're going to get. And because I'm I'm very content with that fact and go, you know what, at least I've given it a go. And I've managed to make a living from it, and I'm paying rent, and it's quite nice. It's sort of, the instability scares me a little bit, and I do worry with AI and whatnot where everything is going. But for the time being, things are okay, you know.
It's hugely exciting, and you do have to take a moment where you commit. I think commitment is a huge part of it. There's like the lucky breaks, but there's also dedicating your time and taking it seriously to be like, I'm going to do this. I can't believe it's been a year and a half. That's really exciting.
Yeah, it's real. It's been a real learning curve as well. I mean, the thing I've realized is my income comes from so many different alternate strands. You know, as a writer, I make money from writing articles for magazines and websites, but also there's copywriting, there's content strategy, there's social media work. There's all sort of a variety of things that keep a house and a roof above my head. You know, I mean, TikTok makes up a very small proportion. I think I looked at the stats the other day. I think I make about £10 a month sometimes off TikTok. So it's not a huge joke.
Yeah, I'm having to do a lot more social stuff because I'm getting ready to release a book, and I'm so inspired by what you do because you make it seem so effortless. You're also really good at having a voice that feels really genuine and warm. I think that's so hard. All of us want to be able to do that. Lots of us need to be able to do that for work. Do you have advice for just putting yourself out there on TikTok and Instagram?
The thing I think I always tell people is basically, you're never going to remember the bad stuff. It just throw it against the wall, see what sticks. It's like spaghetti at some point. I think there's so many videos that are going to get deleted. Even the good videos that you think are really good and they get millions of views and stuff, they fall into ether in about 2 seconds. The way the internet works, it moves so fast. Nothing is ever permanent. It's all impermanent. It's just about getting as many eyeballs on it as possible. I sort of looked out where, when I first started doing my TikTok initially was like a croissant review for TikTok, where I was going around reviewing croissants in London because I thought that was a good idea. And they did okay. They performed all right. And I just eventually got tired of the croissants and realized that the more online content that I saw was all book related, wasn't really speaking to me. So essentially the way I've always kind of worked and created art or created anything is like, what do I want? What do I want to see? And then I'm banking on the fact there's other people like me out there. So you know your audience better than anyone. If you're a writer, you know exactly who you're speaking to. Make content that they would like to see. So basically make content that you would like to see as long as you're a writer. And then having a niche online is one of the big things where you tend to get pigeonholed a little bit, where you become the person who just does high protein recipes, or you become like high fiber girl, or you become books for boys boy. And it's a shame where you have to be siloed, but also the internet is just like professional wrestling. You know, social media is not real. It's nothing about it is real. You don't need to worry about people thinking worse of you, because although they think worse of like your online avatar, right? It's not you. It can never be you. It can never represent you as a person or your likes and dislikes. You've kind of got to be a caricature a little bit, or play a character online. And just, I think treating it like that makes it a lot healthier as well, especially with the mindset thing. I think social media is terrible for your mental health, but if you treat it like work and you treat it like, this is me, Lucas Oakley, and then when I'm online, that's Lucas Oakley, a character that I play on Instagram and TikTok, it becomes a lot more fun. It becomes a lot more manageable. If you get any nasty comments, you're like, God, they fucking hate that guy, but I'm not him. That's like the character I play. You know, that's why I'm sort of egging up for this and for that. And it's a tough one. I think, especially in publishing industry nowadays, they say that they really care about social media following and Instagram and TikTok, but you're not always guaranteed sales from that either. It's hard to say what the follow through is going to be. I think Substack and those kind of platforms are more valuable because those are people reading your work. They're more invested in you as a person, rather than just like, you know, watching 2 seconds of your video and then scrolling.
Yeah, but I suppose to some extent that's an avatar too. It's just like a slightly more literary leaning version of your avatar. I mean, all of this is just, again, like playing The Sims. It's all kind of like a make-believe world. But it's really important to invest in that make-believe world, because people are then dreaming with you about books or about food or about anything. You spoke a little bit about reception and how people see you. And I mean, I know you say like, oh, who cares? It can be easy to think that. I suppose that's hard in the moment. How do you practice that? And maybe we can talk a little bit about the soundtrack of conversation. Tell me about that.
This is great. This is good fun. This is one of the funnest kind of weeks out on the internet where, there's a company called Sheer Lux, and Sheer Lux has got this like big online platform where they record lots of videos with their staff. It's quite a strange setup. And then Sheer Lux Man is their sort of male version spin-off that they've done, where these men sort of sit around in a room, and they basically sent me a DM like, hey, I love your content. Can we pay you to come in and like film a few videos in our office? And I was like, okay, cool. How much are you going to pay me? They told me how much. I was like, okay, cool. I need to pay rent this month, so that's fine. I'll come in and do these videos. And I did a video, and it was something about recommending places to go in Peckham. And then I recommended like a bookshop, Lala Books, which is a great little bookshop. I recommended The Hermit's Cave, a pub, because it's got no music, so it's just the soundtrack of conversation. And then that video got shared by like 3 or 4 different meme accounts of people just ripping me and taking the piss out of me. And it must have been like, I think in total, millions of views, thousands of comments, and like every single one of them quite nasty. But it just comes from such a funny place where, to me, if I ever see something online that I don't like, I don't comment. I just scroll. I move past it. I kind of get on with my life. So I think, to me, the kind of person who is stopping and is taking time out of their day to write something like that, at that point you go, man, you've got bigger problems in your life. That's it. Like, you've got your own things to get. If you need to get this off your chest and write this online, go for it, man, because I'm okay. It's like that Don Draper meme. It's like, I think about you all the time, and he's like, I literally don't think about you at all. It's like, I just don't. Yeah, it's like, you're not even on my radar. I think the good thing with the internet is you can just switch it off. As soon as you realise if the phone is making you upset, put down the phone. You're surrounded by people who love you. You've got friends. You've got a partner. You've got a roof above your head. Be thankful for what you do have. I think if you're in a bad place, that's when it could be a real hard time. I think that's when I do empathise with people. I think that's when the internet can be quite dangerous, where if you don't have a support network of real people doing real things, that's when it gets a little dangerous, because you've got nothing else and you think that is real and you've got this lifeline. But also, we spend so much time on screen, but it's getting a situation now. If someone's got 8 hours screen time, they're on the phone more than they're in the real world, and the phone has become almost more real to them than reality. And I think the biggest thing I tell people is literally like, just get off the phone, go outside and talk to a normal person, smile at someone. It's great. They'll smile at you back and you go like, fucking A, that's it. You're back in action again. That's our big thing, is the phone can make you upset, and there can be things that are going to make you feel bad about yourself, but it's not ever personal. It can feel personal, but it's not, because they don't know you. They think it's personal and they can think as much as they want, but it's just kind of like, comments.
It's also so difficult because as a writer or a content creator, you're finding ways to communicate. I think soundtrack of conversation is a lovely, whimsical way to describe being in a pub. What were you going to say? Like, Hermit's Cove, it's great. It's a good pub. So it's so difficult because the fear of then expressing yourself in any unique way is like, that's the downside. Is then if you're thinking you're going to let that affect you, that's exactly where you don't want to be. You want to be putting yourself out there, being creative, and really just finding ways to express yourself and having fun.
Yeah, and people are very anti-sincerity. I think that was what rankled people about it. I think it was the fact that I was talking passionately about something that I obviously cared about, and I wasn't being too cool and I wasn't being nonchalant, and I actually said like I gave a shit about something. And even then, the Lala Books thing, I was like, I love to like, grab a coffee and then sit there and read some books. And someone was like, there's literally no tables and chairs in Lala Books, and that was one of the top comments, and it had like thousands and thousands of likes. And there's literally a table and chair outside. Like you can it's a situation where it's like you can sit there actually. But I think again, people just love a pile on. I think you shouldn't be worried about being passionate about something, because as many people are going to take the piss out of you, or are going to be like, that's ridiculous that you care about that. You will find your community. You can review sticky toffee puddings, you can find your niche, you can review whatever you want. If you're really into romantasy, there's thousands of people out there. If you're really into this niche, there's always going to find your people, and then you're never going to please the people who don't want to be pleased.
Do you find having feedback on Instagram, having comments, do you find that different to a review? And what's your relationship with looking at Goodreads? I had 1 or 2 comments on Goodreads. I was going on Goodreads because people would say lovely things. It's amazing to be a writer and have this joy, this gift of someone reading something that you've written and then saying, this really moved me. And here's often in reviews, people would write something of their own experience. And I loved that. And then there was the day that someone was like, did not finish, found this woman incredibly annoying, then realized she's in her late 20s. I know that's a really tough time. And it's such a small comment. Also, fair enough, you're allowed to not like a book. But I think I then had to make the decision to step away, because when I was then coming back to write, I was finding it too difficult. And really, I suppose my main ambition is just to keep writing and to be able to sit down and do that every day. And that was like not helping me. Are you as good at stepping away from a review as you are from an Instagram comment, or does it feel different, and why?
It definitely does feel different. And the hardest thing is as much as you want to be able to focus on the really good reviews and the 5 stars and the 4 stars and people saying really nice things, all it takes is one like 2-star or someone saying something catty to really stick in you. And I wish it didn't negate all the good, but it kind of does mentally. So it's definitely it's not good for your mental health to look at Goodreads or kind of... It's at least helpful to have at least a guidance on it and know where you're going to sit in terms of, are people actually liking it? If 5, 10, 15 people say the exact same thing, maybe it's something about your book that is disconnecting with an audience. It is helpful in some ways to kind of look at that bigger picture, but it's probably never really going to make you happy unless it's like a 5-star and every review is like Ben Lerner saying you're amazing and like all these great authors you admire really, you know, blowing smoke up your ass. It's never really going to make you feel great. I think it's only going to make you feel worse. So probably avoiding it is probably healthier, but there is good stuff to learn. It's hard when someone puts a number out of 5 on something you spent years of your life doing as well. That's always going to be difficult, and it's never going to be easy. I think for writers generally, I've never had like a big critical panning. I think all the reviews are quite. I think it tends to be in publishing where I think generally if you're getting reviewed, it's because they like the book. That no one really has like much sort of column space to write about books that aren't good. So I think generally if you're getting reviewed in paper or in like a public space, most people are quite pleasant about it. Goodreads is the one space where I think people can be quite negative and feel as if they. And what's the other one? Storygraph. Have you ever been on Storygraph?
I love
before?
Storygraph. It's really good.
I find
There's
it
a lot
very...
of metrics you can have within Storygraph.
I don't love the metrics though. I'm like, what's giving someone the right to set this metric and that metric and this color scheme and that color scheme? Going like, you're a 3 on this, but you're actually a 6 on this. Like, it's just a book, man. Like, what do you rate on the overall? Did you like it or not? I think it should all be a thumbs up and a thumbs down. That's it. You go, you know what? Yeah, thumbs up. Fuck it. It was a good book. Or you go, that's not right.
I do really defend people's rights to review, but I think as well as an author, you've got to respect that people who read a lot feel very passionately about their reviews and their metrics and their stats, and you have to kind of let people do that and disconnect at a certain point. I think when I have friends that get really upset about reviews they're reading, I do think once your book is out there, it doesn't really belong to you anymore. You've got to learn to step away, and if it does affect you, people are allowed to have their own opinion. Also, if they've bought your hardback, $16.99, they're allowed their opinion. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, and I think if you're writing for those people, you're not writing for the right reasons. You're not writing to get good reviews. You should be writing because it's something you feel passionate about, you need to do, or you want to do it. If you're really writing to get awards or get people to give you a 5 stars on Goodreads, you're only ever going to get disappointed by doing that. I think you're doing it. You've got to have some kind of internal peace and go, you know what? As a writer, at that moment, this felt honest to me, and this is the best I could do. And even then, you can get better. The best thing about writing is you can just get better at it. It's kind of fine. The first book, maybe it's not perfect. Next one can be better. It's probably not going to get worse. Touch wood, hopefully.
I want to kind of continue that note of talking about you and your writing, but also maybe just life. I mentioned earlier when I was kind of writing my memoir, I had to think, what would I want for Freya in 12 months' time? What does like the happy ending look like? I'd love to ask you, if you were writing a book starring Lucas and you were thinking about a happy ending for 12 months' time, what would it be?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, I'd love a house. That'd be great. That'd be really, that'd be a nice happy ending. I think that to me is the biggest thing currently, is that security of knowing that you're going to be okay. You're going to be in a safe space where you don't have to worry about. I mean, our landlord, for context, has just increased our rent, and it's one of those things where it's inevitable. It's London. It's a competitive market. Obviously, it's understandable. Yada yada yada. But also, I'm like, oh, fuck off, man. Give me a fucking break. Life's hard enough as it is. Like, let me live in peace. But being owned onto someone else and having them in control of your life is quite difficult. And I would like to be in control of that again, which I guess has got a major theme as control, obviously, of this conversation, where I like to have that. But I think for me, a nice happy ending would be we managed to find a place where we can live, and me and my girlfriend Kath can move in and start making a little home for ourselves, really. Whereas as much as you like to think about making a home in a flat, there's always a sort of spectre of getting booted out at some point. So that would be quite nice to have some stability, and just more of setting our roots down here as well.
Oh, I really want that happy ending for you. I also think it's a huge part of creativity is space, is having a desk to sit down at, and also feeling stable. Like, it's really hard to create under financial pressure, under a feeling of not being in control. It's really hard to do. So I want this little desk for you. Maybe a cat, maybe a dog.
Oh yeah, why not? A little critter running about.
Throw that in.
Yeah, fuck it. Why not? At that point, you're like, yeah, that sounds got happy. That make me happier. Just a nice desk by surrounded by books, and that'd be me. That'd be me, my element.
I'm projecting my dream desk onto you. But just to wrap up, I always ask every guest the same 3 questions. I suppose we can really think about the creative process and the artistic journey maybe in kind of like 3 phases. It's this act of creating, of processing, transforming into art, but then also putting it out there in the world. So I was hoping that you could give me a tip for each. What's one piece of advice for someone using creativity to process their own experiences?
I think the most important thing is to just get it down. You know, whatever it is you're feeling inside of you, whatever you want to get out, get it down. I don't know what method it's going to be in, what format it's going to come out in. the emotion might come out as a really, raw watercolor that looks a bit like a tree, or it might be a poem, or you might realize in 3 years' time that watercolor is actually a novel. You need to reprocess it. But I think whatever emotion you're feeling and you think it's powerful enough that you need to record this for future generations, or even for yourself to read in 5-10 years' time, get it down. Don't worry about how it looks or how it sounds or how it feels. You can always reshape it and edit it afterwards. I think that raw emotion, that feeling is so important, because in that moment in time, you feel something so strongly, there's something there. And if you're a human being, the chances are someone else out there has had the same experience as you, and that's going to touch a chord with someone. So if you've got this big, powerful emotion, get it down, write it down on a napkin, whatever you need to do, put it in your notes app, record it for then, and then maybe revisit it when you're in a bit of a more stable place afterwards.
And if you want to then reshape it into something, do you have any practical advice, whether it's frameworks or even tips for editing?
I think treating it like work, like a job, is really, really important. As much as you like to be creative and it's using a really fun part of your brain that can be exciting and silly and sort of wild, and you can be creating all these fantastical creatures and whatnot, you need to treat the editing and the actual writing process as a job. You need to set aside time. You need to take it seriously. Even if it's something very serious, very silly, you need to take your craft seriously, and sort of the process behind it needs to be quite drilled down. I think if you're regimented with it, it's going to happen. If you spend hours on something, it's only going to get more real and exist a bit more every time you write.
And finally, once it's out there, what's your advice for handling people's perception of your work?
Oh God, it's never going to be easy. I think it's ceding control and accepting the fact that you no longer own something. But also, as scary as it can be for it to fall into the wrong hands, it's the hope of knowing that maybe the right person out there will find it at the right time. They'll really connect with it, and then they'll, approach you at a falafel shop and tell you it was great. And that's the most important thing.
Thank you, Lucas. And where can they find you, and what are you working on now?
Everyone can find me online at Lucas Oakley. Should be Lucas Oakley on Instagram and TikTok. And we also got Boys Book Club as well, which you can Google and should hopefully come up. I'm currently working on Difficult Book 2, which is being difficult and hard to write and hard to know what to do with. So hopefully that will exist at some point in the future, but it's not done yet.
Good luck. I can't wait to read it.
Thank you.